It is the end of the 12th century. As Europe lies mired in the Dark Ages, two cultures set the standard for human civilization. The Islamic states in Persia and Central Asia, and far away to the east, a trio of fabulous kingdoms in China. Between these stretch vast, inhospitable grasslands, the Eurasian steppes. Although the steppes are formidable, they are not empty. Nomadic tribes, the Tatars, Mongols, and others, eke out a grim life.
These are some of the coldest places on Earth in Mongolia. Temperatures 90 degrees below zero. So for much of the year, they're fighting nature. It's a life with no margin of safety in it.
In 1175, the Tatars renew an old feud with the Mongols. These two tribes, so similar in lifestyle and belief, are bitterly divided by ancient rivalries, a never-ending cycle of alliance, treachery, and revenge. Caught up in their own struggles, they ignore their common enemy, the rich and powerful Jin of northern China. The Jin wisely perceive that as long as the people of the steppes are focused on each other, they won't trouble them. It is in this time of upheaval that great Mongol conqueror Genghis Khan arises in the 12th century. He does so not from a family of kings or princes, but as a fatherless boy, facing death with his family on the barren steppes. Genghis Khan's given name is Temujin, Mongolian for ironworker. It's fitting. His life will demand an iron will. In 1175, when he is barely 9 years old, his father, leader of the clan, is poisoned by the Tatars.
Genghis Khan's father had been an up-and-coming tribal chieftain. Perhaps if he'd lived, he might have become the next Khan of the Mongols. But as soon as he was poisoned, the widows of the previous Khan led the Mongols to desert the widows of Yisige, Genghis's father. And the result was that Genghis Khan was left on the steppe alone with his mother.
Abandoned with her children, Temujin's mother gives him a simple charge: seek revenge. For 30 grueling years, Temujin fights to unite his clan and gain the title of Khan, great leader. He learns to trust those proven loyal in battle, and he remains suspicious of all others. By the age of 40, he has grown to be a gifted chieftain. Having united his tribe, in 1196, Temujin turns to the second task: vengeance on the Tatars.
As far as we can tell, in virtually every battle they fought, in every battle they won, the Mongols were substantially outnumbered by their enemies. But they were much more mobile because they had so many horses, and they were able to operate, it seems, in small tactical teams. No more than a few score at most. So the first thing you'd see if you were fighting the Mongols is they would seem to be everywhere. Oftentimes they would come at you in a single file, and suddenly they would just disperse, and suddenly they'd be all around you. That was really disturbing.
The Mongols' combination of finely honed horsemanship and tactical strategy overwhelms their enemies. They are virtually wiped from the face of the earth in just 2 years. Only their name will live on. And they are but the first of many, for Temujin is molding his army into the finest light cavalry the world has ever seen. In 1206, a ruler's council of steppe tribes acclaims Temujin as universal leader, or Genghis Khan. He now stands poised to conquer the rest of the world and seal his reputation as the bloodiest of all barbarians. He is the ultimate leader, the Khan, of all the restless and nomadic tribes of the steppes. His people live a difficult life in a brutal environment.
This is a society that is perpetually on the move. So what does that say about how these people live, the tents they live in? They have a cane framework, and felts are tied or sewn onto these individual cane panels, and they can be set up inside 15 minutes and dismantled in the same sort of time.
So the inside of yurts was incredibly dark and smoky because they only had a hole at the top and a hole at the doorway. And the doorway always faced south because the Mongols were superstitious that good news came from the south. You had felts on the floor, felts on the walls, so dark, 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 and then everything permeated with smoke. What did they burn? There's no wood on the steppe, so it's dung. So it's smoke that's permeated with animal smell as well.
This hardscrabble existence shaped Genghis Khan's character, and his mother's words of vengeance provided his mission. By the year 1206, Genghis Khan's power over the steppes is unchallenged. Now he directs his vengeance on the wealthy and arrogant Jin of China. In 1211, the Mongols moved to invade China. The enormous ancient nation sees them as scruffy upstarts out to stir up a little trouble. The Chinese have no idea what they are about to face. Within hours of their initial meeting, the Mongol troops annihilate a much larger Chinese force. The nomads learn fast. They copy Chinese siege technology to breach their city walls. They become the embodiment of terror.
And then they start beating their drums. And these drums are carried by 4 people on ropes. And the mere sound of them drove people mad with fear. They brought with them the prisoners from the previous city that they'd captured and pushed them into the moat so that they could go over them, over the dead bodies at the city walls. And then they would slaughter every living thing, the very cats and the dogs.
In 1215, they lay waste to the capital of northern China, Chengdu, present-day Beijing. But just as victory seems within reach, news arrives that trouble is brewing in the Mongolian homeland. The news reaches Genghis Khan across 1,000 miles of territory, carried by a surprising system of communication that eventually will connect the entire Mongol Empire.
They developed very early on a system known as the Yam, which was basically the Pony Express. And 2 messengers would be sent out with special badges that they wore around their waist, showing that they were official emissaries of the government. And horses would be provided at post stations every 25 miles for these 2 to ride off carrying in their hands, literally, rolls with messages on them.
In 1218, the Yam riders bring Genghis Khan the news that Kuchlug, the Khan of the Naiman clan, is fomenting a rebellion among other disgruntled tribesmen. Genghis Khan's hard-won order is being threatened by disloyalty from his own people. This cannot be tolerated. In search of the rebels, Genghis Khan launches a crusade that takes him far from his business in China. As they pursue the rebels west into Muslim lands, the Mongols annex one kingdom after another. Before crossing into each new territory, Genghis Khan gives the local ruler the option to give up the conspirators and surrender peacefully. But if the ruler resists, Genghis Khan warns he will show no mercy. He writes one chieftain, "The disaster will reach you too." Genghis Khan's campaign of vengeance has swelled his empire till it touches the borders of the ancient kingdom of Khwarezm. in present-day Uzbekistan. Though Khwarazm is an attractive target, Genghis Khan goes no farther. He has learned something new.
I think that the key moment in the career of Genghis Khan that lifted him from being a territorial chieftain in Outer Mongolia, and it's not accident that Outer Mongolia means the boonies, it means the back of beyond, that moved him from that to a player on the world stage, was when he began to realize that his territories were on the Silk Road and that he could change the fortunes of his people by trade. And so he sent a series of embassies to his nearest neighbor, the Sultan Muhammad, who was the ruler of the Eastern Islamic world. And those embassies were finally followed by a caravan of 1,500 camels. And I think that what happened there was that this particular camel caravan was so rich that it tickled the greed of the Muslim governor of the frontier post concerned at Otrar, and he simply seized it.
This governor of this town, he saw this Mongol embassy of merchants coming, basically a trade mission come. He saw all the kinds of things that were in there, and he asked the Sultan Muhammad, what should I do with them? He was told. He implied they're spies. These Mongol envoys are spies. What should I do with them? Can I massacre them? And Sultan Muhammad said yes, and they were.
Undeterred, Genghis Khan sends a second envoy, only to have him seized. His beard is shaved off in the street as an act of humiliation before he is sent back. The caravan of gifts, of course, is not returned. Genghis Khan's final dispatch to Sultan Muhammad is simple and grim. "You have chosen war," he writes.
And it was that event, that greed, that breaking of the laws of interchange of ambassadors, of allowing merchants free run across frontiers, that caused the Mongol catastrophe, the catastrophe which, as one Russian chronicle says, left no eye open to weep for the dead. They came, they sapped, they plundered, they burnt, they slaughtered, they departed. Now, this is an utter disaster for the civilized world, and it had that curious small trigger.
As his soldiers prepare for war in 1219, Genghis Khan is unconcerned. That will happen, he says, which will happen. And what is to be, we know not. Only God knows. In carrying out God's heavenly plan, the Khan will teach his enemies a terrible lesson and continue a conquest that will destroy all that stands before him, including the wealth and knowledge of an entire civilization. But the Sultan's stronghold, Samarkand, is defended by an army much larger than Genghis Khan's own. To even the odds, the Khan turns to tools that have served him well in the past: mobility and surprise. Genghis Khan's first blow comes at the border town of Otrar in 1219. After a 5-month siege, the Mongols burst through the defenses and lay waste to everyone and everything in their path. There is no limit to their cruelty. A special fate is assigned to the greedy governor, Inalchuk. He discovers firsthand the meaning of the old Mongolian proverb, "Return what people give to you." Dragged from his hiding place in the citadel, he is held down while molten silver is poured into his ears and eyes. In In February 1220, Genghis Khan plots a three-pronged attack, unrivaled in cunning and malice. First, two columns of Mongols strike Khwarazm from opposing directions, east and west. Their main goal? To lull Muhammad into thinking that these trifling attacks are the Mongols' best shot. Diverted by the Mongols' feints and skirmishes, Sultan Muhammad strings out his forces along hundreds of miles of farmland and river valleys south of Samarkand. But far away to the north, Genghis Khan prepares for the main assault. Genghis Khan carefully seeks out the smugglers and bandits who know the secret water holes and camel routes in the desert of Kızılkum. These will be his guides. They will lead his army over 300 miles of punishing desert sands, a back door to the Sultan's kingdom. In March 1220, Genghis Khan and his army emerges from what the Sultan believed was an impenetrable desert, like demons from his worst nightmare. In one of the greatest strategic rearguard attacks in the history of warfare, proud Samarkand falls in just 10 days. Sultan Muhammad shows his true colors, fleeing for his life from one city to the next. Like hunters pursuing a fox, the great Mongol generals are given 20,000 men and told to crush any town that shelters the fugitive sultan, as they relentlessly track him down and kill him.
So it was not just a matter of beating an army in the field, but eradicating the power of a country to ground zero, so that there could be no recovery. So they sowed salt in the fields, they destroyed the wells, they flooded the cities, they cut the canals, they chopped down the orchards, as if there were no tomorrow.
The Mongols' monstrous rampage devastates magnificent Persian cities like Balkh and Herat. Genghis Khan is not concerned.
They couldn't care less. So the destruction that they visited on the Eastern Islamic world has lasted to this day.
The ruins of once great cities still lay scattered across Persia like ghost towns. With the annexation of Khwarazm, Genghis Khan's empire reaches from the Yellow River all the way to the Caspian Sea, the largest continuous land empire in the history of the world. The most remarkable result of this Mongol conquest is that East is open to West for the first time in 1,000 years.
Pax Mongolica, a Mongol peace, allowed people for the first time to travel in absolute safety from Rome to Beijing. It was never possible before, and it wasn't possible until the 20th century afterwards. It's not a small thing.
Ironically, creating such an empire is not Genghis Khan's goal. The flame of vengeance still burns in his belly, and he still has a score to settle with the Chinese. To that end he now turns, but it is the one thing beyond his reach. In 1227, in his mid-60s, Genghis Khan dies on the march to China. According to legend, the victim of a freak riding accident. Armed troops and slave girls escort his body back to the steppes, where he is laid to rest in secrecy. Genghis Khan's empire seems to be as lost as his mountain grave, for upon his death, the state he sought to unify breaks apart, carved up into 4 kingdoms for his 4 sons. In an eruption of violent conquest, the Mongolian Empire continues to expand after Genghis Khan's death in 1227. In the west, the Golden Horde, descendants of Genghis Khan, rules southern Russia and Khwarezm. In the Far East, the Khan's grandson defeats and unites the three kingdoms of China. And in Persia, the Mongols convert to Islam, building fabulous mosques to glorify their new god. Still, as successful as the Mongolian Empire may be, its huge size makes it difficult to maintain.
There weren't enough Mongols. This was not a gigantic nation. It wasn't like China, for example. Perhaps there were as many as 100,000 people in the Mongol army, and that was about it. So the wider the territories they controlled, the thinner the crust of Mongol dominion on them.
By the mid-14th century, Genghis Khan's empire lies in shambles. Like the old Mongol clans of the steppes, the rulers spend their time fighting each other instead of combining their strength. The Mongols begin to fade into history. Too small in number to rule their vast empire, they become assimilated into the cultures they conquer, adopting their religions and customs as their own. And yet, their impact remains immeasurable even today. By opening China to the west, the Mongols created an insatiable thirst for Asian goods. The drive to quench it spurred the Age of Discovery and the voyages that would lead Europe to America. Truly, by shattering the old empires of China and Persia, the Mongols gave birth to the modern world. Will the world ever see another empire like it? In Mongolia, some fervently hope so. Even today, Genghis Khan is worshipped there as a god. His name is a source of national pride, his tent a hallowed shrine. Small wonder, then, that the Mongols wait eagerly for the spirit to rise anew and for the barbarian to return.